So navigating the house buying process and finding the right mortgage, etc., can be a really stressful time in someone's life, both stressful and exciting. And so I thought today I would go through some tips that I think are really helpful in getting you started in the mortgage process. So of course, this video is tailored for people who don't already own a home and are looking to own a home in the future. But if you already own a home yourself, then if you just want to watch, that's totally cool as well. But also it would be great if you put some comments down below of any tips that you think you'd recommend for anyone in the buying process. And so today I'm just going to be covering 5 tips. I could spend an hour going over 50 tips, but I thought I would just focus on these 5 things and what I thought would be really helpful for someone who's just starting the process. So tip number 1 is to estimate your housing budget. So let's just be real. We've all probably been on Rightmove, looked at dream houses that we can't afford and just dreaming of what it would be like to live in some great mansion by the sea or something like that. But what I would say is the best thing for your mental health is to get a realistic understanding of what your budget can be. And you can do this through a calculator online, which will tell you roughly how much you could borrow, or you can just simply whip out a calculator yourself and do this simple calculation. So all you need for this simple calculation is your income, and if it will be a joint application for a mortgage, then both incomes would be included. So once you have that income, you're going to multiply that by 4.5. Some lenders multiply this by 5, but let's just stick with 4.5 to be safer. So if there was a couple, for instance, who both make £30,000 a year, that is an annual household income of £60,000. You would times that by 4.5, which is £270,000. Then the next thing you need to do is add your deposit. So you know roughly how much you're saving for a deposit. So if you're saving £30,000, for instance, for a deposit, you would add that £270,000 plus that £30,000, and then you have £300,000. And that lets you know the type of budget or the type of house that you can afford. And I think this is a really important part of the process because it helps you to navigate the types of houses you can get. So if you're hoping for a 4-bedroom, but realistically you probably can't afford that on your budget, then at least you're going into the process knowing what you can afford. Also, it helps you to gauge which areas can be realistic for you. So maybe you are hoping to live in somewhere like Knightsbridge, and on a budget of £300,000, you would not get even a garage in Knightsbridge. So it helps you to understand roughly what areas you can be looking at and what you can afford in those areas. And I think this is just the most important first step. Before anything else, get an idea of what you can afford, where you can afford it, which will then just set the scene for the rest of the process. Tip number 2 is to get a decision or agreement in principle. So this simply means that you have gone to a lender, you've given some of your information like your income, your debts, etc., and they will give you an agreement. Well, they say it's an agreement, but it's not really, but they'll let you know roughly what they would lend you if you were to go with them. However, it's not a contract. So even if they say they'll lend you £400,000, for instance, there's nothing to say that once you've gone through the entire application process where they've ran your credit scores, they've combed through your finances, etc., that they will actually lend you that £400,000. It could be more, it could be less, but it's just a rough idea of what they can lend you based on some surface level criteria. But what I would say is good with this is that when you have a decision in principle or an agreement in principle, when you go to look for houses, if there is something that you absolutely love and you think, yep, I want to make an offer on this, it is much better to have a decision in principle already, because it looks like you're a serious buyer, you're ready to go, you've kind of lined things up and you have a rough idea of how much you would be lent by a provider, a mortgage provider. And so this is just a good thing to have in the process. We personally in the process had this very much at the beginning, so that when we went to look for houses, we knew that we had the agreement in principle, and it just made things a lot easier. And for us, the very first house we saw is the very first house we loved and ended up buying. And so it was really important actually to have that document ready, because we were ready to make an offer right away. And so again, it can just really help the process along smoothly. One thing I will say though with the agreement in principle is that they only last for 90 days. So don't get one until you're actually ready to start looking at houses. So getting one and then maybe thinking, oh, okay, well, we've got one, and 6 months later we'll go looking for houses. That's just not the ideal situation, because it would have ran out and then you'll need to do it all over again. So make sure that once you do it close enough to the time when you actually will start looking for houses. Tip number 3 is to prep for the paperwork. Now, personally, I think this is a really important tip because there's a lot of paperwork that goes in to the mortgage process. And so I'm actually going to list out the types of paperwork that you'll need, because sometimes it's just practically helpful to know what is needed. So of course you're going to need some kind of proof of your identity, whether that's your passport or your driving license. Sometimes they'll ask for your utility bills as well, which could be a proof of residency, but also could be used to estimate your outgoings on a monthly basis. So this is something that our mortgage lender did ask us for. Then you'll need to get your last 3 months pay slips if you are employed. And if you do get something like bonuses or something like that, then you'll need to prove that as well. However, with bonuses, they will only take this into consideration as part of your income if you've received it for at least 2 years, and some lenders even require 3 years. Before I continue, don't forget to hit that like button and that subscribe button. It's completely free, but it is very, very much appreciated when you show support for this channel. Now, if you are self-employed, then you will need to have the SA302 form. As long as you have filled out your taxes, then you should have no problem retrieving that form. So you need about 2 to 3 years worth of proof of income if you are self-employed, and then they will take the average of those 3 years. So generally, you know, being self-employed, 1 year could be one amount and the other year could be another amount. And so they'll just add those years up. If it's 2 years, add those and divide it by 2, or if it's 3 years, add that up and divide it by 3, and that would be the income that they consider for you. Now, they will also require bank statements from you, and depending on the mortgage lender, they can require anywhere from 3 months up to a year or even 2 years worth of bank statements. So I personally had to provide 3 months, I believe, worth of bank statements, whereas my husband had to provide more because he was self-employed. They wanted to see more from him, and so we did that. But one thing that I remember is thinking, wow, I wish I prepared more for this process, because at the time I hadn't really cut back in certain areas that I could have cut back in. And I just thought, oh, I wonder if they're going to flag the fact that I buy a lot of coffees or whatever it is. But thankfully that didn't come up. They just wanted to see basically what our spending habits were, what were our monthly outgoing, so rent, transportation, how much you spend on food, etc. And, you know, I think there were a few things on my bank statement that they had questions on, and they actually were things when I had large amounts of money leaving my bank account, and that was due to our wedding. So we just had to explain that those large sums had left because we were having a wedding and a honeymoon, and we were paying for those things. So that was cleared up as soon as we explained it, but they will comb through your finances. So, you know, a good thing to do, I would say, is a couple of months beforehand, 3 to 6 months beforehand, really consider ways that you can maybe cut back on your spending or get rid of certain debts if possible, because they need to make sure that your monthly repayments are affordable for you, but they also need to make sure that if the interest rates were to go up, you can also still afford your mortgage. So they're going to stress test your finances. So it's a really good thing to get your finances in tip-top shape as possible before you apply. However, I wouldn't say that my finances were in the best of places when I applied for a mortgage. They definitely could have been much better, and there were certain areas where I was just spending a bit recklessly. So to be honest, it didn't really stop us getting a mortgage, but you know, it's better to not give them a reason to deny you, I would say. Tip number 4 is to use a mortgage broker. Now, I went back and forth about this, whether we should use a mortgage broker, whether we should do it ourselves. And, you know, I was thinking, do we really want to spend £300-400 on a mortgage broker, or should we just save that money and do it ourselves? And because we were first-time buyers, we decided that it was actually a lot better for us to go with a mortgage broker to talk us through the process, because there could be things that we just didn't know at the time or things that we just couldn't access. Now, when you are looking for a mortgage broker, do make sure that they are a whole of market broker, which means they will provide you options across the entire market. When they are not a whole of market broker and they are a restricted broker, that means they'll only recommend providers or lenders that they work with. And so that's not really what you want. You want to see the full list of options and then, you know, decide from there. And so it's really important that you ask your broker ahead of time, are you a whole of market broker? Because this really has an impact on the offers that they will show you. And my fifth tip is to account for legal fees. Now, of course, when you're saving for a deposit, you're saving to put that down as a deposit. But on top of that, you need to save for legal fees. And this can quite quickly add up. As a rough estimate, expect to pay anywhere from £2,000 to £4,000 in legal fees. So whatever you save for your deposit, add another £2,000 to £4,000 on top of that so that you have your legal fees covered. But I thought it may be helpful to break down some of these fees that you need to consider on top of your deposit. So first of all, we've got mortgage broker fees, which could be around the £300 to £400 mark. Then we've got valuation and survey fees, and this is where lenders will come to value your house. They want to confirm that the mortgage that you'll be taking out on the house is actually worth it for the house that you're buying. Some mortgage lenders do provide this for free. So, you know, when you're going through the process, you can ask your broker, we want a provider who's going to provide that for free or waive these fees. But, you know, you need to consider multiple things. Sometimes they waive these fees, but then they may have a higher interest rate. So you need to weigh up what is actually the better option. On top of the valuation fees, you will also have survey fees. So again, this is just checking the house is worth what the house is saying it's worth. You know, it could be checking for structural damage, depending on the type of survey you get. So there's different levels of that too. But generally, for the valuation and the survey fees, you're looking to spend anywhere from £400 up to about £1,600, depending on what kind of survey you're having and what valuation fee the mortgage lender is charging. Then there is the arrangement fee. So the mortgage lender charges this to arrange the mortgage on your behalf. Seems a bit crazy because you're spending all this money anyway with a mortgage provider, but you know, they decide to charge extra for this arrangement fee. And so this can be included again and waived as free, or it could be anywhere up to about £2,000. Now they do provide the option that you can tack that onto your mortgage, which isn't really recommended because that means you're paying interest on it for a longer term. If you can pay up front, it's much better, but if you can't, at least there are options to add it to the overall mortgage. Then there are conveyancing fees or solicitor fees, and these are the legal fees that the conveyancer charges to take you through the legal process of purchasing a home. But these fees are generally between £1,000 to £1,600. But you really do need to shop around for this because there can be a variation of hundreds of pounds depending on the solicitor that you use. But with the conveyancing fees, this doesn't include the fees that will be needed for searches. So on your house that you're purchasing, they will also do searches. So this could be like a local authority search or an environmental search. So this is an additional fee. Your solicitor will take you through this process, but the fee for the search itself is in addition to what the solicitor is charging you. So you could expect to pay maybe £200 to £400 in addition for these searches, depending on the types of searches that you need to do and depending on the area and the local authority. And last but not least, of course, there is stamp duty. But as a first-time buyer, hopefully you won't need to pay any stamp duty fees if the house is under £500,000. And so this is a really huge saving as a first-time buyer. So as you can see, these fees can quickly add up. So, you know, it really is important to save additional money for this. But do remember that in the process of buying the house, house as well, this could take a couple of months. So you will have time to continue saving as you're buying the house. And so that was something that we did. We continued to save as we were going through the buying process. And so, you know, it's not like as soon as you apply for a mortgage, you need all the money right there and then. You have a couple of months to work it out. But, you know, it is better if you have it already. But if you don't, and, you know, things are moving along quicker than you expected, then take advantage of those months, cut back, don't go out to eat, chill at home, and really grind to save that extra money before the finalization of buying your house. So I hope you found those tips really useful. Of course, I've not covered anything like interest rates or the type of mortgage, repayment versus interest, or anything like that. I think I will do a separate video on that because I just think that could take another 10-15 minutes in itself. And I think this video covers enough to get the process going. But I do hope you found this video useful and enjoyable to listen to. Again, write me some comments down below, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video real soon.